4 minutes ago, the monarchy was shaken by a decision so private, so symbolic, and so devastating that even seasoned palace aides struggled to speak its meaning aloud. Princess Charlotte was granted access to Balmoral's forbidden wing, a sealed family space long protected from public knowledge, while Lilibet's name was officially removed from the internal royal access register tied to that wing. In one stroke, childhood, bloodline, loyalty, and legacy collided. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not speak when the notice reached him. He simply lowered his eyes to the page, saw Charlotte's name where history had now placed it, and understood that his daughter had been pulled into something far heavier than privilege. Balmoral's forbidden wing, a private part of the Scottish royal estate, believed within this story to hold the Queen's most guarded family rooms, personal memories, and inheritance-linked traditions, was not just another closed corridor. It represented trust. It represented belonging. It represented the part of royal life that even rank alone could not unlock. And now Charlotte had been granted formal access, while Lilibet's name had been removed from the internal royal access register, the private list used to decide who could enter that protected family space. Harry received the news differently, but the silence was just as deep. For him, this was not palace administration. It was not a neat adjustment on a private document. It was a father seeing his daughter pushed outside a family story before she had ever been allowed to fully enter it. He read the words once, then again, and the shock did not fade. Lilibet's name had not been moved. It had not been delayed. It had been removed. The difference was brutal, and Harry knew it. Across the palace divide, Charlotte's inclusion looked like trust being handed forward, while Lilibet's exclusion felt like distance being made official. Charles felt the full weight of it when a senior aide placed the amended register before him. An amended register meant the original record had been formally changed, not merely discussed, and that made the moment impossible to dismiss. The king set his hand on the page, but he did not sign the acknowledgement at once. He looked at Charlotte's name. Then he looked at the empty space where Lilibet's had been. Charles knew the palace had crossed from private tension into permanent meaning. This was not clerical housekeeping. This was a line drawn between proximity, trust, and royal continuity. And as the amended register settled onto the royal desk, the faces around it revealed that this was never just about two little girls. It was about every adult who had failed, fought, or feared the legacy behind that locked Balmoral door. Behind every royal decision lies a human cost, and this one carried the most painful kind. Children becoming symbols before they are old enough to understand the weight placed upon them. Charlotte's name was lifted into a protected royal space, while Lilibet's was removed from the same hidden circle. The palace may have spoken in registers and permissions, but the people involved heard something much sharper: acceptance, rejection, and bloodline judgment. Catherine understood the danger before anyone needed to explain it. She sat beside Charlotte with the calm face of a mother who knew panic would only make the burden heavier. The young princess had been raised inside the working monarchy, meaning the active royal family members expected to support the crown through public duty, private discipline, and lifelong service. That mattered because Charlotte was not simply William's daughter. She was part of the visible future, a child already growing under the pressure of tradition, expectation, and comparison. Catherine looked at her and knew that Balmoral's hidden circle had not handed Charlotte a gift. It had handed her a role. And roles inside the monarchy do not wait for childhood to end. Harry felt the same decision from the opposite side of the wound. Lilibet was tied to the crown by blood, by name, and by ancestry. But distance had turned that connection into something fragile. Meghan had built a life far from the daily rhythm of palace duty, and Harry had chosen protection over proximity. But now the cost of that distance had appeared in the coldest possible form. He did not see a register change. He saw his daughter separated from the family story he had once believed could never be denied to her. The pain was not only royal, it was personal. It was a father realizing that the family he left behind still had the power to decide how his child would be remembered. Charles carried the heaviest conflict of all, because he was not only a grandfather, he was the sovereign, the person expected to protect the crown even when the crown demanded pain from his own blood. Sovereign duty meant the responsibility of the monarch to place the institution above personal feeling. And in this moment, that duty pressed against him with brutal force. He knew Charlotte's inclusion would be seen as approval. He knew Lilibet's removal would be seen as rejection. And he knew both sides would read the decision as a message. Camilla watched with guarded unease, saying little, but understanding everything. Charlotte's elevation strengthened William's branch at the exact moment palace influence was shifting toward the future king. And the queen consort could feel the balance changing. Success for one child had become suffering for another. Yet the emotional wound did not begin with the register. It began with one earlier moment, at Balmoral, that changed how the palace viewed trust forever. To understand why Charlotte was granted entry and Lilibet was removed, the story must return to the single incident that turned a private family tension into an irreversible royal decision. Every royal rupture has a moment people later point to in whispers, and for this one, the point of no return came during a private Balmoral gathering months earlier. It was not a speech, not a public interview, not a palace announcement. It was a quiet family conversation behind closed doors, when a question about future access to Queen Elizabeth's private rooms turned the air cold and left William convinced that the line had to be drawn. Balmoral had never felt ordinary after the Queen was gone. The forbidden wing remained untouched, not because the palace lacked keys, but because certain spaces carry more than furniture, portraits, and old memories. They carry emotional command. They carry the final wishes of a monarch who understood that family history could become dangerous when handled carelessly. The forbidden wing meant a sealed private area within the Scottish royal estate, a place treated in this story as a sacred family zone rather than a ceremonial attraction or guest residence. That mattered because access was never supposed to depend only on birth. It depended on trust, closeness, duty, and the private intentions left behind by the monarch herself. Harry knew that truth, but he also knew what blood meant. During what later became known inside the family as the Balmoral September conversation, he asked whether Lilibet's name would be included on future access lists connected to the Queen's private rooms. He did not shout. He did not demand in the way others later imagined. He asked, as a father trying to protect his daughter's place before silence could harden into exclusion. But William heard something different. The prince felt the question had come too soon, too directly, too close to a wound the family had not even begun to heal. To him, the timing felt like pressure. To Harry, the hesitation felt like proof that Lilibet was already being kept outside the circle. Catherine sensed the room change before anyone admitted it. She watched an aide quietly close a folder containing old access notes, and that small movement carried more meaning than any spoken warning. Access notes meant private written guidance about who could enter protected family spaces, and the way the folder disappeared suggested the issue had already been studied before Harry ever raised it. Catherine looked toward William, and he understood the same thing. This was no longer a family question, it was becoming policy. Charles ended the conversation before it broke open completely. The king said the matter would be handled according to the Queen's wishes, and those words settled heavily over both brothers. Harry heard distance. William heard duty. Catherine heard danger. Charles heard the echo of a mother whose private intentions still ruled the room. That single exchange hardened into policy, and when the confrontation finally came, it was not between children. It was between fathers, brothers, and heirs. The Balmoral September conversation became the wound beneath the decision, and when the amended register surfaced, the first true confrontation was inevitable. The confrontation did not unfold before cameras or beneath palace chandeliers. It happened in a private room where two brothers stood with no aides between them, no public smiles to hide behind, and no prepared statement to soften what had been done. William entered, carrying the weight of succession. Harry, entered carrying the pain of a father. Between them lay the amended Balmoral register, and two daughters whose names had become royal battlegrounds. William knew the room would not forgive hesitation. As future king, he was not only speaking as a brother, he was speaking as the guardian of continuity, the long chain of royal duty that keeps the monarchy moving from one generation to the next. The amended Balmoral register meant the private access record had been formally changed, and that made the decision harder, colder, and impossible to treat as a misunderstanding. Charlotte's name now stood inside the protected circle, connected to the Queen's private legacy, while Lilibet's absence spoke with equal force. William understood why Harry had come. He also understood that once the Queen's wishes were placed on the table, emotion could not be allowed to overrule them. Harry did not sit at first. He looked at the page as if it had personally betrayed him, then asked William the question that cut through every careful palace phrase. Was Lilibet's removal personal? The prince paused. It was only a few seconds, but to Harry, that silence felt like an answer sharpened into a blade. He had lived with distance. He had carried exile. He had accepted that his choices had changed his own place inside the family. But this was different. This reached toward his daughter. This took an adult fracture and pressed it onto a child's name. Harry did not see procedure. He saw judgment. William chose his words carefully, but careful words can still wound. He told Harry that Charlotte's access was not meant as an insult to Lilibet. He said the decision protected what the Queen had protected, and that Balmoral's forbidden wing was not a prize but a trust. The Queen's old household notes lay between them, private written guidance from the late monarch's staff about family spaces, access, and preserved rooms. Those notes mattered because they made the decision feel older than the argument itself, as though the current pain had been waiting inside the past for years. Harry heard the explanation, but he did not receive comfort from it. To him, it sounded like rejection dressed in dignity. William did not raise his voice. That made the moment more devastating, not less. He set one finger on Charlotte's name and said the monarchy had to protect what the Queen protected. Harry stared back, wounded by the calmness as much as the words. Two brothers stood on opposite sides of duty and fatherhood, and neither could cross without betraying something sacred. But the confrontation only exposed the surface. The real force behind the decision lies in who had authority to approve the register change. As the brothers left that room divided by more than anger, the palace machinery behind the decision began to reveal who truly controlled Balmoral's forbidden wing. Royal power does not always announce itself with crowns, uniforms, or speeches. Sometimes it appears as a locked cabinet, an old signature, a preserved instruction, and a name added or removed from a page. The decision over Balmoral's forbidden wing was not driven by emotion alone. It came from a hidden chain of authority that placed Queen Elizabeth's private wishes above modern pressure, family pleading, and public expectation. Charles understood the danger the moment the file was brought to him. He had already seen pain spread through the family, but this was different because it carried the weight of a command that seemed to come from beyond the present. Private household protocols meant the quiet rules used inside the royal home to decide who could access protected family spaces. And those rules mattered because they were not shaped by passing emotion. They were shaped by preserved instructions, old approvals, and the belief that the late Queen's private rooms should remain guarded by her own intentions. Charles could recognize the decision as king, but he could not pretend he had created its deepest meaning. The symbolic force belonged to the Queen, and that made the file almost impossible to challenge. Charles read it alone first. He removed his glasses, placed them beside the page, and sat in a silence that revealed more than anger ever could. Charlotte's access was tied to continuity through William's line, a future-facing royal framework that placed the young princess close to the center of the monarchy's next chapter. Lilibet's removal, however, carried a colder explanation. Her absence from the working royal household had become more than distance. It had become formal exclusion from a private inheritance space, turning geography, family choices, and broken trust into something written and official. The king knew what that would do to Harry. He knew what it would mean to Meghan. He knew the world would see one child drawn inward and another pushed away. Camilla noticed the change in him before he spoke. She asked whether the decision truly had to be so final, whether there was any softer path, any temporary wording, any delay that could spare the family from another wound. But Charles answered with quiet firmness, and that firmness revealed the truth. He had already surrendered to duty. The Queen Consort heard it in his voice, and understood that this was not a moment where influence could bend the outcome. The king was not choosing ease. He was choosing obedience to a legacy he feared damaging more than he feared criticism. Camilla said nothing after that, but her unease deepened. Charlotte's inclusion strengthened William's branch, and Lilibet's removal exposed how far Harry's branch had drifted from the protected center. Once Charles accepted the decision, the fallout could no longer remain locked inside a file. It would move through marriages, memories, and rival loyalties. With the king's acknowledgement complete, the palace no longer had a private disagreement to contain. It had a family fracture taking shape in real time. Fallout rarely begins with shouting. In palaces, it begins with a door closing softly, a conversation ending too quickly, and someone realizing they have been left outside the room where power has moved. For Camilla, the Balmoral decision carried a warning she could not ignore. Charlotte's elevation strengthened William and Catherine's future. Lilibet's removal weakened Harry's branch. And suddenly, the Queen Consort understood that influence was flowing away from her. Camilla did not move when Charles left the room. She remained where she was, listening to the silence he left behind. And that silence told her more than any palace briefing could. The decision was no longer only about family access. It had become a signal that the monarchy was closing ranks around William's household, the branch seen as closest to the working future of the crown. A working royal household means the family members expected to carry public duties, protect royal traditions, and represent the institution day after day. That mattered because Charlotte's name was not being lifted in isolation. It was being tied to the same future that William and Catherine were already preparing to inherit. Catherine felt the weight from a different place. She was not thinking about influence in the way Camilla was. She was thinking about Charlotte. The young princess had been granted something sacred, but sacred things inside royal life often come with invisible chains. Balmoral's forbidden wing was more than a private family space. It was connected to the Queen's memory, to guarded rooms, and to the emotional inheritance of a monarch whose presence still shaped the family. Catherine knew that Charlotte's access would look like honor to the outside world. But inside the palace, honor could quickly become pressure. One child's inclusion could become another child's pain, and Catherine understood how cruel that contrast could become. William moved quickly to prevent that cruelty from hardening. He quietly instructed that Charlotte was not to be publicly used as a symbol, not in briefings, not in quiet leaks, not in the polished language palace aides used when they wanted a message to travel without fingerprints. His fear was simple and devastating. Charlotte could become the center of a public storm she never chose. The future king had accepted the decision, but he refused to let his daughter become a weapon in the war between brothers. Then the final confirmation arrived. A palace aide removed Lilibet's name from a secondary briefing copy, a working duplicate used to align internal records, and the act proved the decision was already spreading through palace machinery. Camilla understood then that this was not reversible mood or temporary punishment. It was implementation. It was permanence taking root. But the emotional balance changes when Charlotte herself becomes aware that something has shifted around her name. And just when the palace thought it could contain the meaning of the register, a private moment between mother and daughter turned the decision from policy into heartbreak. The turning point did not come from a council table or a royal signature. It came in a quiet private moment, when Catherine sat with Charlotte and chose tenderness over ceremony. No aides stood nearby. No official language softened the truth. A young princess had been granted entry to a hidden part of Balmoral, But her mother knew the greater task was not explaining privilege, it was protecting innocence from the machinery of monarchy. Catherine could feel Charlotte watching her too closely. Children sense fear in pauses, in softened voices, in the way adults choose gentle words for painful truths. Charlotte was old enough to know something had changed, even if she did not understand every part of royal protocol. The private rules and traditions that guide how the family handles titles, access, duties, and protected spaces. That mattered, because this was not a simple family visit, or a harmless privilege. Balmoral's forbidden wing carried the emotional weight of Queen Elizabeth's memory, family history, and belonging. For Catherine, the wing was not only a place behind a locked door, it was a test of who was trusted with the most private pieces of the monarchy's heart. Charlotte finally asked the question Catherine feared most. Had she done something wrong? The words were small, but they struck with devastating force, because they revealed what the adults had failed to hide. Catherine took her daughter's hand before answering, not as a future queen, not as a polished royal figure, but as a mother trying to keep one child from carrying the pain of another. She told Charlotte that being trusted with something special did not mean another child was unloved. She spoke carefully of Lilibet, not with coldness, but with compassion. Because Catherine understood that the palace's decision had placed two young girls into a story neither had written. William entered later, and immediately saw what the decision had done. Catherine's face carried the strain of someone who had protected the truth without making it cruel, and Charlotte's quietness told him more than any briefing ever could. The prince had feared public anger, but this was worse. The wound had reached inside his own home. He understood then that Charlotte's access was not only a sign of trust, it was also a burden, one that could follow her through every headline, every comparison, and every bitter argument between adults who should have shielded her from all of it. William admitted the fear he had held back for days. He told Catherine that Charlotte's name might now be used to reopen every wound between his family and Harry's, turning innocence into ammunition. Catherine did not answer quickly, because she knew he was right. Success for their daughter could become suffering for another. Honor could become accusation. And while Catherine tried to preserve Charlotte's innocence, the public seized on one image, one headline, and one devastating contrast that turned the private register into a national reckoning. By morning, the private decision had become a public earthquake. What began as a hidden register change inside Balmoral was now being judged across breakfast tables, television panels, palace gates, and social feeds. The monarchy had tried to speak through procedure, but the country saw a far simpler story. One little princess welcomed into the Queen's forbidden wing, another little girl removed from its records. The emotional force was impossible to contain. Palace staff moved quickly, but speed could not erase the damage. They prepared a restrained response, built around continuity, privacy, and respect for Queen Elizabeth's preserved household instructions, meaning the private guidance believed to protect the late monarch's personal rooms, family spaces, and final wishes. That explanation mattered because the palace needed the public to see order, not punishment. Yet the public was not focused on royal wording. People were focused on the contrast. Charlotte had been brought closer to the Queen's most guarded memory, while Lilibet had been pushed out of the same hidden circle. No statement could soften that image. No careful phrase could make it feel less personal. Harry saw the headlines and pushed the paper aside. He had survived criticism before. He had heard his choices judged, his marriage debated, his distance from the family turned into endless argument. But this cut deeper because it carried his daughter's name. Lilibet was not a policy point to him. She was his child. And in that moment, he felt as if a family she barely knew had decided her place without ever looking into her eyes. Meghan watched him withdraw into silence, and even without speaking, she understood that the story had crossed a line. This was no longer about Harry's royal past. It was about Lilibet's future being defined by people who had already chosen distance. William watched the coverage with a different kind of dread. He had feared this exact storm. Charlotte's name was now being discussed, as if she were a political statement, a sign of victory. a symbol of the monarchy narrowing around his line. The prince knew his daughter had not asked for any of it. Catherine knew it too, and the strain between honor and protection grew heavier with every broadcast. A major morning newspaper captured the national mood with a front page showing Balmoral's gates beneath the headline, "One princess enters, one name erased." Those 6 words did what palace language could not. They turned private procedure into public judgment. Then a broadcaster delivered the line that made palace aides freeze, calling the decision the clearest sign yet that the monarchy's future is being narrowed around William's line. The phrase spread fast because it sounded like a verdict, not commentary. Charles heard it and understood that the family's private fracture had become a national reckoning. But once the noise faded, the monarchy still had to answer the deeper question, not publicly, but morally, about what this decision truly meant. And when the headlines settled, what remained was not scandal, not strategy, and not ceremony, but the painful verdict of a family choosing the future at the cost of another branch's belonging. In the end, the Balmoral decision was not simply about a locked wing, an amended register, or 2 royal names written on opposite sides of history. It was about what the monarchy values when sentiment and survival collide. Charlotte was not merely granted access. She was quietly entrusted with a piece of Queen Elizabeth's private world. Lilibet was not merely removed. She became the symbol of a distance the palace chose to make official. Charles accepted that truth with a sadness he could not hide. The king understood that the crown, the institution of monarchy itself, separate from the private feelings of the family, had protected continuity, but it had also wounded his own blood in a way no polished statement could heal. That mattered because the decision placed the monarchy's deepest private symbols around the working line of succession. The family line expected to carry the royal future through duty, public service, and inherited responsibility. William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis now stood closer to the center of that future, while Harry's branch stood farther away than ever. Charles knew the meaning was brutal. The palace had not only chosen who could enter a room, it had chosen whose closeness would count. Harry carried the other side of that verdict like a private defeat. He had once believed Balmoral belonged to the story of his childhood, his mother's memory, and his place as a son of the royal house. Now Lilibet's name had been removed from a royal space he once thought could never be denied to his children. The pain was not only about access, it was about belonging. Balmoral's forbidden wing had become the emotional stage where loyalty, proximity, duty, and inheritance were measured more strongly than blood alone. Harry felt that measurement sharply, because it told him that distance was no longer just personal. It had become official. William made his final choice quietly, but the quietness gave it power. The prince refused to let Charlotte be paraded as a victor. He would not allow his daughter to be turned into proof of another child's exclusion, or into a banner for palace triumph. Catherine understood him, because she felt the same fear. She treated Charlotte's access not as a celebration, but as responsibility. And that response gave the story its last trace of dignity. In a family split by hurt, compassion became the only thing that still looked royal. This moment meant the monarchy chose preservation over reconciliation. It protected Queen Elizabeth's private legacy, strengthened William's future line, and made clear that royal belonging is no longer guaranteed by name alone. Charlotte became the child entrusted with memory. Lilibet became the child marked by distance. And the crown, colder but clearer, moved forward with its future secured, and its family forever changed. There is no softer ending to this decision. Balmoral's forbidden wing opened for Charlotte, closed against Lilibet, and revealed a monarchy willing to break hearts in order to protect the shape of its future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.